So let's just put this in context. Okay. Note 37 of the Kaufman text, page 24. Finally, this is like 1, 2, 3, the third paragraph. And I'll actually start. The repudiated world, the world that I've given up on, versus an artificially built, true, valuable one. Finally, one discovers of what material one has built of the true world. Right? What is this true world built of? And now all one has left is the repudiated world, the world that I've rejected, the world, the nihilistic worldview. And one adds this supreme disappointment to the reasons why it deserves to be repudiated. Right? I have rejected, and I drew an image of this before. Right? I was of the world. I pulled myself out of the world. Woo! My head got bigger, I guess, when I got out of the world. And I've rejected or recanted or extracted myself from condemning this world. Right? I've rejected the world. And he says, and now all one has left is the repudiated world, and one adds the supreme disappointment. Right? So I add So I take a little bit of rejection, I add disappointment to the reasons why it deserves to be repudiated. Right? Now I judge, I condemn, I repudiate the world. At this point, nihilism is reached. All one has left are the values that pass judgment, nothing else. All I have left, after I've sort of extracted myself from this world, I've now repudiated and rejected because of my disappointment, because of my failure, or my sense of failure. Now it's time to say, now it's time to judge. Now it's time to add that judgment and justify why I'm repudiating this horrible existence, right? Here the problem of strength and weakness originates. The weak perish, right? The weak are going to perish too, right? And I sort of like this, right? The weak perish of it. Those who are stronger destroy what does not perish. The strong are going to dominate. Right? S-T-R-O-N. What does he say? Those who are strong destroy. Those who are strong destroy what does not perish. Number 3, those who are strongest overcome the value that pass judgment. In sum, this constitutes a tragic age. It's an age in which, right, number 3, those who are strongest overcome the values and pass judgment, right? Emphasis on passing judgment. And I'm going to explain why I think this is important in a second. Those who overcome are the strongest, right? And they pass that. The strongest pass judgment. And the question is, well, what is the? I have a note to myself: explain the role of judgment passing. Well, why is this important? Well, this should look familiar, right? This should look familiar. And now I don't normally do this in my videos because I just like to present the information. But the question is, what in the world? Is it just me, or I don't understand what Nietzsche is saying at this point? This tragic sense of age, this tragic age. What does that have to do with anything? This is just my interpretation. I could be wrong. I don't read secondary authors, so this is just my interpretation. Here's what I think Nietzsche is saying, and I could be wrong, and I'd actually like, if you're still watching at this point, to leave a comment and tell me what you think. Do you think my interpretation is right or wrong? What do you think Nietzsche might be saying in note 37, right? Okay. I'm of the world. I extract myself out of the world. I now reject the world because of my disappointment, and the strongest of my kind are able to pass judgment, so that there's some judgment being passed here, right? This. Right? I'm able to pass judgment. For me, this looks exactly like the system that I illustrated earlier, this sort of conceptual idea of nihilism, right? Because to me, I see an overwhelming similarity between the individual who posits the highest moral values, aspires for the highest moral values, recognizes that that value collapses on itself into a state of nihilism, the individual posits this utopic worldview, only to realize that that too collapses on itself and hardens his nihilistic interpretation. And the question is, well, why does it? Because we recognize that insofar as we have a moral imperative, right? In the traditional sense, and this is what we ought to do, and here's what I am doing, that this is telling me, this is the act of judging. This is the act of judgment. You ought not. Let me give you an example. I'm going to give you a few examples. Utilitarianism. This is just an example, right? If utilitarianism says that my actions ought to be governed by the greatest happiness principle, such that all that I do is for the greater good, and, you know, there is a sense in which, I'm going to give the most ridiculous example ever, just to make this really simple and clear. A person that I love, whoever that person might be, has a particular blood type that would cure the world's problems, let's say cure AIDS. There's some configuration in this individual's blood that I love so much that if his or her blood was extracted, which would result in the death of the person that I love, it would cure the lives of everybody who's suffering around the globe. Under the GHP, in sort of this sort of gross generalization, I should be willing to sacrifice that person that I love for the greatest happiness of all people. The fact that my attachment to this one person is such that it is, in no sense justifies or legitimizes the suffering of everybody else. This person should be sacrificed for the greater good, right? Well, that judgment, the fact that I ought to do that, that the system is telling me I ought to function in that behavior, that I should govern my actions in the world. This is important, that my actions, the whole point, and I did this at the beginning of the series, the whole point of ethics is to control behavior, actions, to control the way that I think, to control the way that, in a serious sense, the faith and the beliefs that I have, right? The moral imperative is telling me what I ought to do, or what I must do in a stronger sort of deontological sense. Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to sacrifice the person that I love so that everybody else can, you know, random people I don't even know, can live a better life. I mean, it sounds callous, but I'll say it. No, I love my person more, and I want this person to be here, and no, I'm not going to sacrifice this person for the greater good, right? Well, there's going to be a judgment passed, right? That judgment, on an ethical scale, is one of either morality or immorality. I'll say that again. That judgment, the judgment, properly, is one of morality or immorality. So, if the imperative, the moral imperative, dictates X, the moral imperative tells me to do X, and I don't do X, then it's going to judge me, right? It's going to judge me and judge my action as immoral. If the moral imperative says do X, and some other person does X, then the moral imperative is going to judge me, judge that action of X, as conforming. This is conforming. This is not conforming. Nonconformity to the moral imperative is an immoral act. Conformity to the moral imperative is a moral act. Right? So what ends up happening is that the moral imperative is controlling my action. It's judging me. It's telling me what I ought to do. Now, how does this relate to this rejection that we were talking about before, right? And the point is, and I want to find it, those who are strongest overcome the values. This is number 3, 37. Note 37, bullet point 3, right? Those who are strongest overcome the values that pass judgment. Number 2, those who are stronger destroy what does not perish. The weak are going to perish, right? So what ends up happening is that those who have judgment have the ability to pass judgment and reject this world, reject the worldview. How is it that I legitimize passing judgment? Because you ought to be doing what I do, right? There is a sense in which I now, as an individual, as a human, have the same capacity. I function in the